Okay, welcome along to Migraines Month. I'm chatting with Nicole Buratti. Nicole, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do for your job, and then we will talk about migraines in a sec.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm so excited for your group. I love being a member of your group, and it's such an honor to be an expert in the group and to be invited on my first Facebook Live in your group. I am a women's health coach with a big focus on sex and hormones. I'm also a functional nutritionist, so I have a really unique approach to bringing nutrition to a woman's sex life, which you would think is unheard of or impossible, or how does that work? But actually, everything that we put into our body affects what we put out of our body, including sex.
Absolutely. So, some people watching might think, what's the link between migraines and sex? But as you were just saying to me before we started recording, you've had a long-term migraine disorder, so you are well versed on migraines.
Yes, I've had a migraine disorder almost my whole life. I would say my reproductive life. It started in my teen years with premenstrual syndrome, and then it turned into PMDD. And now that I'm in perimenopause, I didn't realize I was in perimenopause. And I was getting more intense migraines around the time of ovulation and right before my period. And then again, day 3, and they would last for 5 days, 7 days. And then there came a time where I was not without a headache. I had a headache every day, but it would turn into a migraine around certain points in my cycle. And I've had migraines so bad that I've been hospitalized for them.
Wow.
Yes, I would go to my local hospital and they would give me fluids and some medications and send me on my way. And then I had a migraine so intense last summer that I had seizures with the migraine. And they transferred me from my local hospital, which is at the Jersey Shore, pretty small town, but still pretty city-like as well.
Mhm.
And they transferred me to NYU at New York University
Wow.
Hospital. Yes, and I became a very interesting patient at NYU while a team of doctors from endocrinology, neurology, and psychology studied my brain and what was going on with my migraines. Long story short, they found a benign tumor that was flared when my body was in any type of stress or distress. And so a top neurologist in New York City confirmed that my migraines were a result of hormonal fluctuations and changes through my menstrual cycle as a result of perimenopause,
Wow.
being why they were getting so much more intense. It was no longer PMS, PMDD. Now it was perimenopause. And so this doctor made a deal with me. He said, knowing my lifestyle, I'm going to put you on medication to give you relief for 3 months. In those 3 months, I want you to be your own health expert client. And I want you to address your migraines as if you are your own client. Change your lifestyle and do everything you would tell one of your clients to do. I did, and I got off medication. And I have not had a migraine like that in a year.
Wow. Okay. So you're pretty well the expert on this then. So
Yes.
what things have you discovered that work?
Well, definitely changing my diet, eliminating gluten, so wheat flours, and eliminating dairy products. That was the first thing. Eating a whole food diet, avoiding any kind of triggers like chocolates. When I do eat chocolate, it's more of a craving for magnesium, so I'll up my magnesium, but I will have a little piece of dark organic chocolate just to satisfy that sweet craving, which
Hmm.
is really common in perimenopause. But I avoid most chocolates, alcohols, I'll have the occasional social drink, but nothing with wine is one of the biggest triggers. Those are my triggers, but there are other triggers as well, including sex. Sex can actually be a trigger for migraine.
Wow.
In a small percentage of the population. However, on the flip side, for most of the population who suffers migraines, sex is a relief from migraine. And so I started to focus on balancing my hormones with sex for my personal life and for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing Instagram posts about how sex was an important part of balancing hormones, and a major global publication picked me up and asked me to write an article. So to say I'm versed in hormones, migraines, and sex is probably true.
Yeah, that's a very specific niche, but really, really interesting. So, is it the fact of actually having sex, or is it the fact of having an orgasm that helps?
It's both. So sex itself, any type of orgasm, is going to relieve you of a migraine. So as soon as you feel a migraine coming on is when you are going to engage in either solo sex or sex with a partner. Mm-hmm. But it is the act of sex that brings on endorphins and oxytocin. Okay. So not using a toy, but actually using your hand or your partner to get the oxytocin, because when we use a toy, we skip over oxytocin and we just get to the point.
Yes, I suppose we do.
Yes.
So somebody who isn't in a relationship, it isn't all doomed. They can still absolutely manage migraines this way.
Yes, as long as you have one or two of these, we're good. Okay.
So yes, so there still needs to be that kind of emotional connection, I guess.
Emotional connection, yes. So even if it's solo sex, you have to find that solo connection with yourself, that personal connection, and being more positive about your body image and yourself and your confidence in yourself and your sexuality is going to bring on the endorphins and the oxytocin that's required to have pain relief and an orgasm.
So I've got so many questions. I don't know where to start. This is great. So if I'm just thinking that for some women, obviously their libido disappears during perimenopause.
True.
So if somebody wants to try this to relieve their migraines, but they really have no feeling of wanting any sort of sexual activity at all, how would you encourage them to sort of get started?
Okay, so one of my tricks, and when my doctor said go balance your own hormones, and I was reading all about sex, I was like, my sex drive is pretty tanked. Another symptom, I am in perimenopause. But the more that I learned about having sex when you have a low libido is that the more you do it, the more your brain craves it. It's just like, I used to be a runner. Occasionally, I crave it. But if I were to start running today, tomorrow I'd want to run, because that's how our brains are wired to crave endorphins. Endorphins are similar to a heroin high. The more we do heroin, the more we crave it. The more we get our endorphins flowing and oxytocin flowing, one or both, we are going to crave it more. So it's a happy hormone. And endorphins have been proven to be 200 times more effective than morphine when used correctly.
Wow.
So using endorphins correctly really requires that connection of the mind, the brain, and the body, and really being in touch in your brain, shutting off the logical side of the brain and getting in touch with the flowing feminine side of the brain. We will be more in touch with our body.
Makes sense.
It's a pretty cool phenomenon.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. And I guess there'll be some people watching this who maybe feel quite uncomfortable about the idea of solo sex, but they're not in a relationship, or they and their partner aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye at the moment. I guess it's a question of starting exploring.
Exploring, yes. And I think solo sex is important. The more that I study it and get to know it myself, I think that it really brings a certain level of confidence to ourselves as a whole, but especially if we're considering the dating world and starting to get to know a new partner. Because if we don't know ourselves from the inside out, then we can't expect a partner to get to know and love us as much as we want them to, if we don't do it ourselves.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And it's a form of communication where you're able to communicate with your body, get to know your body, and then you're able to communicate that with a partner you've been with long term, or a partner that you've just met or hope to meet. You know, as women, our sex drives and our sexual fantasies actually change throughout our lifespan. So our adventurous side seeks more adventure usually as we get older. And so really exploring that side of things will be beneficial for any relationship, whether it's a solo relationship or a mutual relationship.
And just quickly going back to the migraine side of things. So let's say somebody's started to get their libido back up by either working, doing solo sex or doing sex with a partner. Would you encourage somebody as soon as they start feeling the beginnings of a migraine? Is that the time? Yeah.
Yes. So you want to start addressing the migraine, no matter how you start addressing a migraine, from the start.
Yeah.
So if you're using medication, you want to, follow the doctor's orders, obviously, but typically the doctor will say, as soon as you feel the migraine coming on, that's when you get in a dark room with your cold washcloth and you take your medication and drink lots of fluids.
The same goes for go and lie in the dark room and do way more fun.
Yes, exactly. Now I have to say too, a lot of times migraines will also trigger other pains in the body. So if a woman has chronic migraines, sometimes she also has TMJ. A lot of times she'll have pelvic floor pain. So when there's chronic migraine pain, there's chronic pelvic pain. And there have been tons of studies that have shown that, and there was recently a study in Germany, I believe, where they showed any tightness in the shoulders to the brain and the scalp correlated to migraines. And this part of the body, the head and shoulders, reflects directly to the pelvis.
Wow.
So if there's pain in one area, there's probably going to be pain in the other area. Isn't that interesting? I thought, as a sex expert, I found that so interesting. And I know that we talk about that in my pregnancy classes when I was teaching pregnancy. If you're clenching your jaw, you're clenching your pelvis, and the baby's going to have a harder time or a longer journey to come out. And so if we relate it to sex, we're going to have a harder time relaxing if we're in the climax of the migraine.
Yeah. And it makes sense that then it may initially for people feel sort of counterintuitive to turn to sex to help the migraine if their pelvis is feeling so tight.
Right, exactly. Which is why in the beginning of the sensation of migraine coming on is when you want to start addressing it, rather than waiting until, okay, this is a migraine and I'm seeing stars.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. I think we're going to have to do more more recordings around this, but for now I'm going to leave it there. But that's been so interesting. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.